Assessment redesign for a Bachelor of Social Work honours degree and looking at specific unit, new approaches and trends in social work. So here we have the outline of the original assessment piece that we're going to evaluate and make any changes that I see fit. So the learning outcomes as listed here do reflect real world relevance. However, the current assessment is not valid in measuring these outcomes, which is very important. These are the assessment details. Briefly, it's a 3,000 word essay, which is a traditional assessment piece that can include factors that do not lead to successful learning until feedback is given, and race notes that generally in a higher education setting, feedback wouldn't be given until final submission. Social work is most often collaborative in nature, and it's best to match the real world experience in the assessment design. An essay is not something that a social worker would complete, so we need to change the format of the assessment. Essays can also be difficult to attain authenticity to the student's learning, so we're looking at who done it, and we want to fix that challenge and make sure that whoever is assessing this assessment piece knows exactly who has completed the learning. An assessment piece, as I said before, is not something that students would do as a social worker, and they'd feel a lack of meaning around it, and based on critiquing a chapter out of the resource provided. So Ray suggests that students are unlikely to be successful in learning due to this lack of meaning, and that essay writing is its own skill, which can provide disadvantages to some learners. Some learners basically don't know how to write essays or have very poor essay writing skills, but this can be overcome by using different assessment pieces or items. In terms of online implementation, an essay could be provided. However, it's a poor choice as the online environment is something that is susceptible to a lack of collaboration, and collaboration is something very authentic to the social work real world setting. And essay format is already one independent in nature. So we're really trying to avoid independent work here. Participants' high workloads outside of online learning, such as family and other work commitments, can result in low completion rates, and tasking them with a 3,000 word essay is a high workload as well. So the final essay product is not something useful in a real world context, so it fails that, and neither is the independent format of the essay, which I elaborated on earlier. And another major problem is students will focus a lot of energy on this assignment because it is worth 50%. Unfortunately, there's no practical task for them to link theory to or apply theory to, and so they will remember very little of the learning that they are conducting, if much learning is occurring at all. Feedback is lacking, or there's basically no feedback detailed in this assessment piece. It will be assumed that feedback would be given after the assignment is submitted. This is basically an example of what Hattie and Clark have said, in that feedback has been found to be ignored by students if given out, with no opportunity to use the comments or if no time is available. So students will just move on and not really take any of the teacher or assessor's feedback on board. So I've outlined some major flaws in the original assessment piece. Now I'm going to outline my redesign and justify what I've done. So you can see there that students are going to design a community arts-based activity proposal, and that can be implemented in the local area, but it also needs to meet a diverse range of clients and needs. They're also going to provide a feedback to a peer proposal submission. It's just a little bit more detail about what we're aiming to achieve with the new assessment piece. I did some research into social work and also new trends and arts and social work, which we're trying to stay specific to the unit. And this is definitely something that I've found social workers would do in the real world context. So in a brief overview of what we're going to do, we've got 3 formative tasks and a final task. The first task is aimed at creating personal meaning for the student in relation to that in their own lives. The second one is looking at a real world example, but building the student's ability to evaluate and analyze that real world example and connect it to social work theory. Then the students move more into the final assessment piece with the draft of their 5-minute video draft, basically, of their proposal. And this is where they are going to provide feedback to each other and enable them to extend their own learning and others' learning as well, and collaboration occurs there. And then the final task, summative task, is their 10-minute video proposal, which needs to be conducted in a professional manner and in a way a social worker would. So the learning outcomes, as I said before, are great, and they do enable us to create a task that produces work or skills close to the profession that create realism. So they are not going to change. And for this reason, we are measuring what we want to measure. We do want to measure that students can communicate through different ways, but more specifically, I'm going to look at speech, because this is something that social workers do a lot in their interpersonal work, but they can also justify their proposal with social work theory, and that students can design an activity that meets a range of clients and needs, which meets learning objective 2, which is extremely important for social workers to be able to do in the real world. For online implementation, as I said before, outside workloads can be problematic. I've addressed this by scaffolding the formative assessments over a period of weeks, and this builds learning context relative to the assessment over time. So students have formative assessments at week 1, 2, and 4, and then at week 6 is when their final submission is handed in. But after week 4, they're given, weeks 1, 2, and 4 are given feedback as well on their learning. The use of a video for summative assessments ensures the assessor of who also completed the work and learning. And that's something, as I mentioned before, can be a challenge. And it basically ticks the box for the assessor. I know who completed the learning. I know who has completed this task. In relation to collaboration, in the week 4 task, students are going to give each other feedback. And this is designed to have the students think critically and extend their own learning. So they're not just focusing only on their proposal, but they're looking at other proposals and other perspectives, and both extending their own learning, but asking questions that can extend their peers' learning as well. In terms of accessibility, disabled students have been found to perform better when given alternative assessment options that are offered to all students and not just disabled learners. So I'm giving all students the video task, and that is actually something that Adams and Brown noted in their book is a preferred assessment option for disabled students. We would also implement the use of dictation software for publishing discussion posts, text versions of audio and video resources, and closed captions on videos. The other thing in terms of accessibility would be we would provide a very good example of community arts activity so that students know exactly what we are looking for in terms of a good demo, and it minimizes confusion for all students, whether they be disabled or able. So that goes into inclusivity. One major factor with inclusivity is to ensure that all students are given appropriate support. How I've designed the assessment to meet this is that the formative assessment pieces give the teacher knowledge on where each student is at, and then they can apply appropriate support from there. This is just another outline of the formative assessment integration and how it flows down, and with the feedback provided, which goes into peer feedback enables learners to receive comments faster than when academics are providing it alone. So
I've tried to piece together both, or have pieced together both peer and academic feedback in all formative assessments, not summative assessment, just so that they get, as I said before, multiple perspectives, but they also receive feedback quite timely. So it can be hard for an academic to, reply to everyone at the same time in a really timely manner, but peers, when they're replying to each other, can do it very quickly. They also have the opportunity to self-reflect on their own work while they're providing feedback, which is something I spoke about before. In terms of real-world application, as I mentioned at the start of this redesign reflection, I did some research into what social workers would do, and this is a product that could be used by a local social organisation if a student wished to take it to them, because it's something that they would generally do. And also we're trying to assess communication and presentation that are real-world social work skills through the video proposal. So that's my assessment redesign. I look forward to any feedback you may have and any comments. Thank you.